Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. As a way of winding down from reviewing 2 maxi series, we'll be going to a single issue per episode format, because man does it get exhausting reviewing 3 issues in 20 plus minutes. With that in mind, I'm taking issue with a 4-part miniseries starring Wolverine's arch-nemesis, Sabretooth, written by Larry Hama, with art by Max Texiera. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Let's crack open Sabretooth Death Hunt #1 and see if this story makes us want to turn the page or turn our heads. The cover features a red background with the character's name in black, jagged along the edges. Pretty fitting for the guy, if you ask me. There's a sidebar with the full title and tagline. Ambushed by his past, on a quest for his life. Those could easily be lyrics to a folk song from the 1960s. Or a rap song from the 1990s. Look in the O's and you'll see a portion of the featured art just behind the cover. An image of the villain skulking towards the reader, though maybe not so much skulking since we clearly see him. We begin in a limousine owned by someone who prefers to go by Cyborg, having driven from Seattle to Vancouver to take Victor Creed home. The Brood is being his usually classy self, contemplating whether or not to kill the guy. Cyborg, or Pharaoh if you want to ignore his naming preference, can detect multiple hostile minds as they stop at a mansion, asking if Vic would like him to stick around. Get lost, Cyborg! And true to his word, he does, never seen again for the rest of the series. Or maybe he's in the background or something. It isn't like we can tell what he looks like in this panel. As the limo takes off, Tooth is attacked by ninjas, out for revenge for Creed's murder of their clan leader. They don't specify in dialogue, but given the red color scheme, it's a safe bet these are the Hand, a rather well-known organization in the Marvel Universe. We'll take your skull and carve it into a bedpan! Oh, come on. A skull would be a terrible bedpan. It'd be uncomfortable and end up making a mess on the bed anyway. This is why you didn't make it in medical school.
Once again, Dr. Jan Itor. Dr. Jan Itor.
Vic knocks the lot of them back and buzzes at the gate for someone called Birdie. The ninja approach again, ready to die if it means taking out their quarry. Though Sabretooth retorts he's been ready to die since before the ninja were born. Man, that's depressing. Though it does raise the question of why he's fighting back. Anyway, after a huge explosion, we see Birdie, standing more like she's posing for a calendar than firing the satirically large gun that would just knock her to the ground, if she could even lift it realistically. I mean, she doesn't look all that muscular, and unless that weapon's made of wicker, I imagine she'd need both hands to even attempt it, instead of one being on her hip. She looks like a poster that would hang in Judge Dredd's bedroom. I am the law, but you are my dream girl. Yo. I bet they could make a pretty penny if they recycled all those spent shells on the ground. Anyway, after apologizing for her tardiness, from keeping an eye on a batch of ninjas camped out in the back, she finishes the last of them off, saying that there have been a slew of offers being faxed to the house in Sabretooth's absence. As he kicks open a door, in his own place for some reason, he detects a worry in her voice that the work will dry up, but that isn't likely for an assassin so long as there's greed, loathing, fear, and envy to fuel demand. A whimsical way of explaining what Creed does for a living while explaining how he affords a mansion of his own. Later, he's taking a soak with Judge Birdie massaging him. When she suggests he cool out, Vic takes offense at being told what to do and throws her into the tub. She threatens the damage she could do as a psychic that frequently traipses through his mind, but Tooth doesn't believe she'll do it, as there's nowhere he couldn't find her if she should attempt something and it fails. You wouldn't last 5 minutes without Instagramming the chicken salad sandwich you'd have at the Panera Bread downtown. After chugging some champagne, he mentions Cyborg unscrambled some rather horrific memories, and further encourages Birdie to do her job, so she obliges, launching a psychic beam. The result is a pastel background with forms that start out imprecise but eventually become clearer, as Vic describes the experience being like two dissimilar feelings at once: life and death, desire and fear, that sort of thing. Then we see the image of a small child in a onesie named Creed, manacled with a wire mesh muzzle, asking if Birdie will be his friend, but looking rather sinister. No red flags there. The child describes how they can't know about his friendships, are always punishing him and threatening to lock him in a root cellar for good. As Birdie gets closer, we see a rather odd coloration blur beneath her eye. It could be shading, but it looks starkly different from the rest of the comic. The restraints come off, and the child starts throttling Birdie, until realizing the woman means him no harm. They hug until the vision ends, with Tooth chastising his employee for wasting time on phantoms, and punches her. This job must have the worst benefits. Creed heads up a flight of stairs, telling Birdie he needs the glow her powers provide to take away his pain.
That seems less like taking away pain and more rechanneling it to someone who doesn't really deserve it, you jackwagon.
And looking at the trophies on his staircase walls, one of them is a pair of hands holding an axe. Vic must have been feeling really creative that day. Later that night, Birdie is in nothing but a towel, probably because you build up quite a sweat when you get smacked around by a psychopath, and proceeds to disable the mansion's security system. This grants access to a group of muscle-bound commando types with big, complicated-looking guns. Despite Birdie telling them he's asleep, we see Victor waking up, knowing someone else is around. Noticing the vault-like bedroom door is closed when Birdie left it open, she tries warning the intruders, but they don't listen to her as they open it with a missile. But, surprise for the mercenaries, Sabretooth is suited up and rearms his security after taking out some of his foes himself. As mines and wall spikes take out more enemies. Yeesh, even without blood, that's pretty graphic, especially for a comic with the Comics Code Authority label on it. Anyway, Birdie evades the traps because she knows them oh so well.
Even so, it still wasn't exactly smart to do all this while only wearing a towel.
Some gas, tasers, and triple-strength horse tranquilizers later, the killer is subdued enough to be netted and carried off, swearing revenge on his subordinate. We jump to a flashback where a child is chained to a wall by the neck, surrounded by a water dish, some bones, and what looks like a ball and rattle. I don't know what that liquid is he's sitting in, but I somehow doubt it's water. A man walks from upstairs, intending to ply out the boy's devil teeth and claws to help beat the evil out of him. A woman tries to stop him, insisting the child may be a trial in the same way Job was tested, but only to get bitten for her troubles. I guess that was all the convincing she needed, since now she holds the boy's head as the pliers close in on his teeth, and Sabretooth wakes up on an X-shaped operating table being stitched up by a Dr. Mabuse. There's really nothing to indicate villainy better, like having your name almost entirely being a word like abuse. Apparently, the past week has seen Creed getting a full system upgrade, enough for an off-panel voice to refer to him as what he thinks arcade-goers would say, Turbo Sabretooth.
Shut up, comic!
Dumb. 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 Dumb.
The only context we're given for a full system upgrade is that, as Victor notes, he's been made stronger, noting what a bad idea that'll end up being for the people that did it to him. We're introduced to the Tribune, who looks like a reject from the original Transformers, saying the extensive operation has been so Tooth can carry out a special assassination. As insurance that he goes along with it, he's been implanted with Hyperthermite 3. I just hate Dynasty explosives, so smug and uppity, which he demonstrates using a hand ninja they'd found on Creed's property, causing him to explode and his remains to burn away.
I suppose we could have just showed you a video of the explosive at work and field test, but we had a spare ninja prisoner not doing anything, and sure, it made a mess, but well, this is what we pay janitors for.
Tribune's target is the shape-shifting mutant Mystique, whom Creed has 48 hours to eliminate as soon as he's fully healed and accepts the job. Vic tells him to start the clock, and warns that after this kill, the Tribune is next. After a couple of pages, we have a couple pin-ups for the title character. One where it looks like he's menacingly standing beside some water, and another where he's fighting Wolverine. But it's a tad awkward given how little of Wolvie there is. Then we have the back cover, which has the same red background as the front, but has the image of Sabretooth leaping out from page 16.
So the story gets a fairly interesting start. The artwork isn't quite to my taste. I feel like the lines are a bit too scratchy, and the overuse of darker inks makes the characters seem less distinct, which isn't helpful if you're not familiar with the likes of Birdie or Cyborg. However, the relationship between Birdie and Creed is fairly well established so far. Tune in next time as Creed starts his new job and the crazy water cooler conversations that are sure to follow. And blood spilling, probably a lot of blood spilling. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Sabretooth, Death Hunt. The story started with the villainous title character being attacked by ninjas, then betrayed by his psychic sidekick Birdie. After being augmented by the mysterious Tribune, he's tasked with killing Mystique within 2 days, or a bomb inside his chest will detonate. And you thought you got nasty hop on.
Issue 2's cover sees Sabretooth pouncing on Mystique, the latter of whom looks like she's already had a bit too much of that there champagne. On a mission of death, a past life is found.
Turns out Victor is the reincarnation of a squirrel. No one ever lets him live that down.
Well, maybe Squirrel Girl. Anyhow, he busts down his front door, a little more understandable than the door he broke in issue 1, but still, if you like any kind of security, you'll have to pay for a replacement, dude. So he's looking for his betrayer, announcing his encounter with the Tribune.
Did he pay ya in Roman coins? 30 pieces of silver?
I know that's probably more of a reference to a famous act of betrayal, but it kind of second-hand compares Sabretooth to Jesus Christ. And that's just plain stupid.
Vic finds that Birdie is up and left, though not entirely, as he pokes out a window, sees her about to take off in his best ride, and in the next panel is instantly on the ground to have a chat.
Why did she stick around? The operation apparently took a week, and she's just now getting out of Canadian Dodge? What, did she need to decompress in the hot tub for a couple of days before remembering, oh yeah, I turned traitor on a savage murderer?
However, she is smart enough to know that Sabretooth only has meaningful discourse with his impending victims and drives off, give or take a car door. Creed heads to his garage full of cars to find all the tires slashed. Emphasis on slashed. No, really, it's in big, bold, red letters and everything. And for a claw user like Vic, that must be extra insulting. But there is one little thing the telepath didn't know about. A motorcycle kept hidden behind the wall. You'd think he'd want easier access to it for things like cleaning and maintenance, but I'm no grease monkey, so what do I know? He gives chase on the road, even snapping at someone mouthing off at Birdie right before going back to threatening her. However, they come to an incomplete bridge, so Birdie turns around and runs Creed over. She barely has time to wonder where the body went when he bursts out from underneath the car like a hairy xenomorph. She threatens to shoot him, but he just smacks the gun away, sending them over the rail. That's distracted driving for you. Creed tells her to do it, and she replies by asking now with the intense incredulity of 4 question marks.
Smile, you're on candid camera.
No, she just used her powers to enter his mind where their perception of time is warped and Kid Creed is choking her again. They're in the memory of Creed taking Tribune's job. Same scene as the end of issue 1, same dialogue, but different angles. However, it's expanded upon, with Tribune asking how Creed intends to kill him after Mystique, since the robot-looking boss man's identity and location are both unknown, and they'll just knock him out and leave him outside his home when they're done. He then calls a woman to cancel the rest of the day's appointments, who does so, and we're returned to the car, inexplicably landing with little problem and driving on. Vic mentions that he feels better now and might actually regret it if he ever did kill Birdie. For a couple of minutes, anyway.
I keep trying to come up with a job security joke to make, but with these two being so comically bizarre, I got nothing. Pun not intended this time.
Elsewhere, Tribune is relaxing after a drink and a cigar, in his suit but not his helmet, confirmed that his people have completed a task at Tooth's Seattle mansion. Seriously, how many mansions does this guy have?
The poor man's version of me. Which, to be fair, still makes him insanely rich.
His assistant, Ellie, tells him they have the latest surveillance and background reports on Mystique. Furthermore, any loose threads that could be traced back to Shadow Bob Ironpants have been severed. And given that underlaying, that probably means murder was involved. Arriving at his Seattle home, Creed finds the name Paris spray-painted on the wall, the location of his intended victim. He doesn't know if it's true that she's currently one of the X-Men, certainly possible, a lot of villains have joined their ranks over the years, and tells Birdie to get them a flight to the French city, not intending to kill her anytime soon. That ninja trying to sneak up on him, not so lucky.
Yeah, this is all kinds of confusing. Why did they drive all the way to Seattle in the first place? And how isn't there some kind of border security that would find a 7-foot man-yeti driving shotgun in a beat-up sports car just a wee bit suspicious? Wouldn't it have made more sense for Tribune to contact Creed with the information when it was available?
In the City of Lights, Mystique is on the phone, a phone we don't really see, arranging a meet with someone, then morphing into a dark-haired, light-skinned woman. She muses to herself about how she once worried about losing her identity, but says that as a shapeshifter, her real self isn't the blue weirdo, but whatever she wants in a given moment. Like one moment she's wearing a robe and a necklace, and the next she's in lingerie.
Well, that was kind of weird. Maybe I'm more used to the more prideful Raven Darkholm that wasn't ashamed or passive about her mutant powers. Or maybe the dialogue was just a clunky way of expositing her powers in a short amount of time.
Sabretooth does the old rooftop jog while Birdie follows on the ground, who tells him they've reached the building where Mystique is staying, down to the room. Did they somehow get all that information from the spray paint? Well, however they found out, Victor crashes through her window and has her by the throat, but recognizes a scent and is splashed with Martel Visop. However that's pronounced. He doesn't seem to mind until Mystique flicks on a lighter. One made in the USA.
Red hair, white clothes, blue skin. Makes sense she'd buy American.
Then sets her attacker on fire and escapes. After the flames die out, Creed heads to ground level where Birdie points him towards the metro. In the subway, Raven is running and shape-shifting as she boards a train, briefly changed into a nun until Vic sniffs her out in her guise as homeless Ron Funches before his weight loss? He's already locked on to her familiar natural scent, and as he bursts into an otherwise empty car, she morphs into Creed's mom, beginning a flashback to when his dad tried to kill him with an axe in lieu of being more careful while keeping him chained up forever. And take a look at the shape of the axe.
Wait a minute. Huh. Well, that just made a lot more sense. I mean, those arms are beefier, so they might not be his dad's and are something more symbolic, but still.
Despite the bites she received in the previous issue, the woman is determined to save their boy, though Pa stops her from finishing that parental claim, and she shields the child as the axe falls and Sabretooth roars back to the present. The train has stopped and Mystique is back on the move. having intentionally opened the old wound, not feeling sorry for it at all, as Creed demands to know how she knew about his childhood. She takes an elevator up the Eiffel Tower and tells the killer, who's climbing up the old-fashioned way, that he told her himself a long time ago in Berlin, before the secret program put blocks in his mind. If Vic wants to continue the conversation, he can do so with her dinner date, a fellow member of the same program, Wolverine. Aw, and look at that, he brought flowers. Then we have another Sabretooth pinup, but it looks like he's preparing himself for his version of tickle torture, which would just be plain torture in this case.
Well, so far, the pace has been kept up pretty well. I didn't feel particularly bored reading it, though there is a hiccup of crossing international borders for no explained reason. And more, like Tribune somehow knowing his reluctant employee would head to Seattle, and how they knew the exact room Mystique was staying in. The art isn't any better or worse, but leaves a lot of detail out in favor of darkness and shadow. Next week, we see if Wolvie and Creed can get through the appetizers without killing each other. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Sabretooth Death Hunt. After an ambiguous surgery leaves him with a bomb in his chest and a shapeshifter to kill, Victor Creed chases down his treacherous psychic sidekick Birdie, but chooses not to end her life. Yet. They travel to Paris and chase down Mystique, who hints at having special knowledge of Sabretooth's past. She decided to elaborate on this as she dines with the old Knucklehead himself. Colin Mockery, who do you think I'm talking about?
Issue 3's cover features little more than the heads and claws of Tooth and his shorter rival, and it doesn't look too bad. Pretty straightforward where these two are concerned.
Guess who's coming to dinner? Wolverine!
What? Don't tell me this is another remake of that Sidney Poitier movie. Did you Hollywood morons learn nothing from the Ashton Kutcher debacle?
We open with Logan and Creed verbally sniping at one another, intercut with shots of the Eiffel Tower and the restaurant they're in. Weird thing is, it's supposed to be night, but the coloring of the sky seems to say daylight more than anything else. Heck, look at Mystique, even she's changed into her usual blue form, now in a black cocktail dress and a red jacket. Tooth aims to deal with her as soon as he finishes off the runt.
Ain't you being a bit optimistic? I don't think positive, I am positive.
That's just weird coming from someone like Creed. Has he been going to motivational seminars in his spare time?
Mystique breaks up their tussle by changing into the form of a blonde woman in a trench coat, whom Vic recognizes as Lenny Zauber. As Birdie arrives from nowhere to keep Logan at bay with a gun, Mystique insists she isn't merely playing dress-up, that her attitude, gestures, and voice should match up with Creed's memories of Berlin years back. She tells the two foes to call a truce when it's announced their table is ready. A bit later, and Sabretooth wearing a tie with his classic suit is probably the best thing in this entire story. Also note how Birdie's costume is all red except for her gloves, which isn't consistent with her previous appearances. I guess it's either an intentional choice by the colorist or maybe a mistake. Who knows? Anyway, she answers Logan's question about why she's hanging with Creed, and she says it's better than being dead. But Wolverine says that's something he can remedy, but Creed insists Mystique explain herself before he fulfills his contract. She narrates a flashback to East Berlin, where Creed had been tasked with killing a scientist. But when he busts into the lab, he's already been killed by Lenny, using Dom Perignon laced with a poison to which she'd taken a year to build an immunity. They end up fighting their way out, complimenting how valuable they must be to their superiors, and make a rather messy getaway.
Why did you tell me that story?
Because the true story would have been too horrible for you to contemplate. Enjoy.
In the present, Wolverine thinks that checks out.
Sabretooth went on a mission by himself. Maverick, Wraith, and me didn't go.
Way to repeat yourself for absolutely no reason, bub.
However, Victor went rogue for a month, rumored to have shacked up with another agency's operative. As it is, Wolvie's itching to inflict some bad karma on his old associate, but after he pops one set of his claws, Birdie draws his attention to a grenade, pin pulled, and a safety sprung lever away from detonating. So Logan resorts to simply retract 2 claws and use one as a toothpick. He's not the only anxious one, as Sabretooth breaks a champagne bottle and threatens Mystique with the jagged end, insisting that his liberation of Lenny was noted in debriefing files, and is skeptical she could be as old as someone with a healing factor that slows aging. Raven explains that due to her metamorphing abilities, her cells constantly revitalize, so she's also slow to age. Another flashback shows Lenny and Victor in a safe house, apparently very, well, shall we say, comfortable with each other. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. She heads out to meet a contact, blows Vic a kiss that gets its own bubble, and no sooner does she leave than their room gets a call, warning her not to go, as the meet is a setup. Back to the present, and ripping off his tie, Tooth brings up one more hitch to Raven's story. He saw Lenny's dead body in the local morgue after police pulled her from the canal. While that was indeed the real Lenny Zauber, she was in truth a dull accountant that Creed never actually met, and was merely used as a means for Mystique to disappear.
Now, this doesn't really seem clear to me. Was Mystique actually working for the same people as Lenny Zauber, and she was just a sacrifice of that organization? Or was Mystique acting independently and took over Lenny's identity and just kind of rolled with the situation? I'm just trying to pinpoint who exactly is the more heartless one in the situation is all.
Wolverine decides to ditch his own Sunday best, and I'm kind of impressed how he managed to hide his pauldrons under a tux.
If everyone else is gonna trash the dress code and get funky, then let's all jump in the pool.
Yeah, this is one of those times the dialogue in this story gets downright weird, even for a comic. Anyway, Birdie reminds him of her grenade, which he plucks away with his claw, replacing the pin and keeping it safe. But the evacuating patrons don't know that. Though it does make one wonder, how were these other patrons reacting to the mutants before they saw the grenade? You know, with one of the very large and bestial people growling at everyone and threatening a woman with a broken wine bottle. Creed mentions that he has an explosive inside him anyway, and isn't letting anyone stop him from ending Mystique, until she mentions they have a son. Authorities arrive, but Birdie psychically masks the 4 from their sight. Mystique mentions the child isn't a mutant, but is rather unexceptional. A perplexed Wolverine asks where the boy has been this whole time, pointing at them with both finger and grenade claw, but that second part proves to be a poor choice, as Raven Lenny grabs the explosive.
Kind of feels like a hackneyed way to build up some tension. Why wouldn't Wolvie just use his other hand? Was he busy scratching his butt cheek in disbelief that his arch-nemesis procreated?
Mystique says the kid would have been problematic to her plans, whatever those may have been, and gave him up, threatening to release the grenade and kill them all if she isn't released. To prove Victor wrong and show she indeed has the guts, she insists the one who set the entire scenario up, who hates them both so much, is none other than their boy looking for revenge. She holds up a picture that's too small to show much detail, and drops the explosive. As Logan covers the weapon with a champagne ice bucket when it explodes, Sabretooth grabs his cohort and takes the expressway to the ground level.
Time to book, Birdie. We got a plane to catch.
You may be a merciless killer, but you have a long way to go when it comes to delivering puns. What you should have said was, time to book. A plane, that is. Oh, I apologize for nothing.
Wolvie's dazed, but his costume is perfectly intact. In fact, there doesn't seem to be much damage shown from the detonation. I really hope they aren't expecting us to believe a metal cup used to keep fancy booze cold managed to suppress a grenade's explosion. We don't see much more than dust and knocked over furniture. Well, He picks up the photo, recognizing who's in it as a creep, suggesting that perhaps he could have used more love from his mom.
I've abandoned my child!
Back to the form she had at the beginning of the book, Mystique seizes the photo back indignantly.
You don't know anything. I know one thing. I know I don't like you.
Considering they're usually enemies, I don't imagine that this stings very badly. Also, I'm pretty sure Wolverine says he doesn't like a lot of people. The ones who ask him not to smoke in their presence, the liquor store clerk when they're out of his favorite brand of beer, the pizza guy if he's late with an order.
On a plane headed back to the States, Victor is unsure if the sissy boy in the photo is really his son, but none of that will matter if he doesn't find the Tribune before the bomb inside him explodes. After he threatens a woman complaining about his feet on her armrest, Birdie says she may be able to find robot pants by searching Creed's memory. With that, we again go back to when Creed was restrained and given his task. Birdie notices Tribune's use of a keyboard prompt, which is at least a start, but then sees the New York skyline as the mystery man speaks with his assistant. They know her name as Ellie, though we don't know how since she hasn't appeared much since and was never mentioned by name around either Creed or Birdie. But closing in on a plaque in Ellie's office, they discover their foe is headquartered in the GC group of investment bankers. Birdie can break into their security system, and Sabretooth will have them hook, line, and sinker.
Bringing issue 3 to a close. The dialogue gets a little wackier, a few questions are raised that probably won't be answered, and Wolverine showed up because... Wolverine. I guess it'd be pretty expected that a character would make an appearance in the miniseries starring his nemesis. Next week, we close out the series and the season with the final issue and final thoughts. His manicurist for charging him extra, Cyclops for marrying Jean, Cyclops because Cyclops, people asking if he thinks all ham is Canadian bacon. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, just about finished taking issue with Sabretooth, Death Hunt. A dinner in the Eiffel Tower consisted of champagne, French cuisine, and the revelation that Sabretooth was intimate with Mystique, though not knowing it was her at the time. After the tearing of clothes and scaring of fine diners, it's revealed their tryst resulted in a child that the shapeshifter gave up. In lieu of killing her, Victor and his sidekick Birdie head back to the United States, where one last mind scan reveals where to find Tribune, the Gobot cosplayer that put a bomb in Creed's chest.
The cover is simple but fitting for the character. Half of Creed's roaring face with what looks like blood splattering in front of him.
Sins of the Father, the final chapter.
The beastly brute has commandeered a bus and heading for the Mammon Fiduciary Trust Tower. Closing in, it looks like the lobby is strangely full given the hour. Full of ninjas, naturally, and after crashing into the building, he and Birdie respectively slash and shoot their way through, having only 15 minutes to deactivate the bomb.
How do these two know how much time is left? After accepting the contract, Creed was knocked out and taken from New York, apparently, to his place in Vancouver. And that would have to take probably a couple hours. So, unless a mind scan showed that there was a clock in the room that they can make an estimate from, and we did not see that, there's no way for them to know if the bomb's going to go off in 20 minutes or 10 minutes other than writing convenience.
Also, I find it a little weird that the cover said Sins of the Father, singular, and yet here it says Sins of the Fathers, plural. Just a weird discrepancy. Well, Ellie informs her boss that things in the lobby are getting worse, so they go to Condition Yellow, which might include having to suit up as the Tribune. After Tooth and Bird have done away with all but one ninja, the survivor thus far reveals that after the Tribune took one of their own, they followed the trail to the tower and figured Creed would show up eventually. He throws the ninja through a window and confirms with Birdie that the investment bankers group they're looking for is known as GC. Speaking of, Tribune readies his employees, who arm themselves and are promised with bonuses and stock options should they perform with exemplary fashion.
You take him from his house, put a bomb in his chest, and try to kill him after he kills some broad? Geez, Sabretooth is used to dealing with mercenaries, murderers, and ninjas, but you bankers? Scary. This paraphrase brought to you by the hilarious film Oscar.
As they barricade the doors and cover the fire stairs, Dr. Mabuse, the guy that performed the surgery, boasts the effectiveness of Tribune's team, and how their killer won't reach them before the now 10 minutes on the bomb are up. Sabretooth will never get past the combined battle team of your hungry bankers. That line is just plain hilarious, despite the serious tone of the book. And the Doc isn't being sarcastic, since his boss warns him not to underestimate their foe, who wasn't even supposed to find their offices at all. However, security cameras aren't finding the brute anywhere.
Maybe he disappeared. Magic!
No, he's leaping across the side of the building with Birdie hanging on for dear life. He asks his underling why she didn't know Tribune's identity or location, what with her selling him out in issue 1. Turns out there were cutouts involved, so she never met the guy.
What, like cardboard cutouts? Why didn't you check behind the thing? Silly bird.
Just as it's suggested that Sabretooth might have given up, and some weird dialogue from Tribune saying he never gives up, he crashes through the building. Tribune is overly confident of his fancy weapon, the Charged Hyperkinetic Lepton Impulse Thruster Gun, or Chicklet for short. Yeah, nothing says wound beyond a healing factor like candy-coated gum. But it proves less than capable of ending Creed, who attributes his survival in part to the enhancements Tribune provided, but of course never elaborated upon. As Birdie covers the door, and calling him Mr. Kreese raises eyebrows for the trapped Ellie and Mabuse, Sabretooth admits to letting Mystique walk, then throws his would-be employer/killer out the window.
Flap those arms, boy! Might slow you down some!
Oh, I have no joke here. That's just a funny line.
With 5 minutes left on a bomb with a 20-foot blast radius, Victor grabs Mabuse and tells him to start operating. No instruments or anesthesia necessary, or a scalpel for that matter, as the killer prefers to cut himself open. It's a scene that shows you it can still be pretty graphic even if you don't clearly show everything. After Birdie takes out the last of the deadly bankers, a surviving ninja appears from nowhere, which I guess is sort of their thing, and slashes at her, though the damage isn't shown very clearly. Before he can attack again, she saves herself with a mind blast. Mabuse has gotten the bomb out, and the best we can tell is that it's shaped similar to an orb, but that's about it. Tooth throws it out the window just as it detonates, figuring it might have done him in otherwise, and insists on using safety pins Ellie happens to have to close the incision. The Tribune, sans his helmet, is hanging outside the window, taking aim at his enemy when Vix sees his armored form reflected in Mabuse's eye, using the Doctor as a human shield in the nick of time to absorb an entire clip of ammunition.
This is exactly why I don't use an HMO.
We see the Tribune's face for the first time, previously having been off-panel or shadowed, as he states that eventually someone will rid the world of Sabretooth and Mystique, standing up for normal humanity against mutants. Creed isn't planning on killing the guy just yet, not until he finds out why he planned all this and what his beef is against mutants. He won't talk, so Birdie, hobbling in, connects their minds, seeing a twisted mindscape of Tribune's childhood memory, of him peeking through a keyhole. On the other side of that door is Mystique, saying the boy must have ran away from boarding school to spy on her, discovering her shape-shifting abilities. Having previously told the boy that his father was a bond trader, she uses her powers to reveal the savage truth. Behind each of the 1,000 doors in the mindscape is a reason for this guy to hate mutants, confirming that the one who wanted them both dead was none other than their son, Graydon Creed.
Graydon first appeared in the X-Men comics only a few months before this miniseries began, so this was more of a development of the character than some big retcon. Fun fact, the founder of the anti-mutant Friends of Humanity hate group is based on a real-life neo-Nazi. Okay, fun is probably stretching things a bit, but you see what I'm saying.
Victor is so unimpressed with Graydon that he says he'd rather have Wolverine as an offspring, which is likely an inside joke to writer Chris Claremont originally wanting Tooth to be Logan's dad, but that's a story for another time. The bigot isn't worth bloody hands, but may be worth a neck snap, but Birdie objects on the grounds that he may well be of the Creed bloodline. Recognizing the woman as his father's escape valve, Graydon reveals a knife and promptly stabs her with it, even though it looks like she saw it coming.
Not much of a psychic, was she? What, too soon?
Birdie's death was the only way for Graydon to hurt his father, leaving him alone with the pain of his horrific actions. Sabretooth throws him aside, now convinced this hateful man is indeed his son. The comic ends with the titular villain walking out, telling Graydon that he'll convince another poor soul to keep his demons at bay, but also leaving with a warning.
You had better watch it, boy. I'm gonna keep an eye on you, here?
And the fallout for this, where Sabretooth is concerned, is continued in X-Men Unlimited number 3.
Thus concludes Sabretooth, Death Hunt. All in all, I can say this story is surprisingly entertaining.
A miniseries focusing on an ensemble or supporting character is usually testing grounds to see if they're interesting enough solo for their own ongoing series. I don't remember one ever spawning from this, but it was an enjoyable enough read, though not without its problems. Issue number 1 of this mini was the second appearance of this character, Birdie, and she ended up with a very unceremonious departure, though she does kind of pop up as memory flashbacks and such in subsequent comics. I'm guessing in the Maverick one-shot here, I've never read it. But it is listed online as a comic where she does make an appearance, though that would indicate that she did leave something of an impact on an otherwise villainous and feral character.
And it's not like we ever really got to know her. Her loyalties to Sabretooth really flip-flop, and while some of that could be explained away by self-preservation, she seemed defending the guy when she could easily let him take care of things himself or get taken care of. She actually seems to care about him on some level, but it's never really fleshed out. At best, we can glean that she allies with Creed, but is not such a bad person herself deep down.
The story dabbles with the past of a character that was about as mysterious as Wolverine or Rogue at the time, having similar problems with memory, and while you might feel bad for what was done to him in his childhood, the book never lets you forget he's a bad guy. Heck, everyone's a bad guy except for Wolvie, and most of the time he's present, he's itching to kill Creed. At times the dialogue can seem weird compared to comics today, and part of that is because of the era in which it was written. But some of it is just fun, like Tribune talking about how Sabretooth is anything but a quitter, the deadliness of bankers, or Victor just relishing his circumstances.
However, there are some things that don't add up. Some small, like Birdie and Creed just knowing the name of Tribune's secretary, or why Wolverine and Mystique were meeting for dinner at the Eiffel Tower, other than plot convenience and sales-boosting cameos. But there are things about Turbo Sabretooth that don't make any sense.
Firstly, why bother enhancing someone like Creed, an assassin that can smell out their target, just to kill Mystique? Yeah, she's a sly one and can evade attackers, but in terms of physical strength, she wouldn't have been a match for him before the surgery. Second, at no point are there any given indications of these enhancements, nobody remarking how he's faster, stronger, more agile, or anything that would aid him on such a job. And even if you tried saying it was a lie to excuse putting a bomb in his chest, which also isn't indicated, that would be negated by the fact that Tribune states outright that he put a bomb in Sabretooth's chest. It would have made more sense to just leave out all that enhancement junk, say he's got an explosive inside him that'll detonate unless he kills Mystique, and leave it at that. The only thing you'd have to change is that scene with a chiclet gun, either removing it entirely or just show that it's not effective against a brute that's all muscle and healing factor like Victor.
They toy around briefly with the idea that Creed may have a death wish, but it's not elaborated upon. If he's been ready to die for so long, why not just let the ninjas try their best and kill him? Or go on a TV binge until the bomb goes off? Does he want Logan to kill him first, or does he want to kill Logan himself? Or is it survival instinct?
Then we have Graydon's plan. It's not entirely terrible, aside from the whole make the guy I want dead even stronger part, but there are other problems. Creed should have been suspicious from the get-go that someone with clear resources hired him for a job and was going to pay him in not exploding instead of currency. And since he wanted both his parents dead, why didn't Graydon just send someone to track Sabretooth to Paris and detonate the bomb when Sabretooth had Mystique in his claws? Heck, since Birdie's loyalties were so ambiguous, why not give her the detonator? And another discrepancy in continuity, Mystique says at first that she gave the child up almost immediately, but in Graydon's memory we see that she spent several years actually raising him, though sending him off to boarding school. Why'd she bother lying about it? I don't know, maybe it gets elaborated on in future X-Men titles after this.
And I've mentioned before that the art isn't exactly my favorite. It's kind of scratchy. It lends itself to forms blending together to the point that detail is lost, and making them seem very indistinct when it comes to characters. I mean, would anyone have recognized Graydon Creed if we had a clear shot of his face from the very beginning of the story, before the big reveal? It's not like his character design is dynamic or distinct in any way, like Wolvie, Vic, or Mystique.
That said, the style does actually work very well for the series. There's a grit to it, an almost unclean tone, the atmosphere of a filthy world that fits an assassin like the bestial Victor Creed to a T.
When all is said and done, the series is nothing spectacular, but at least is a fun read and is about what you'd expect in a story about the focal character. So that does it for this season of Taking Issue. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in January with more comics, more snark, and more reasons for me to lose my cool. Unless I get bored and take up stamp collecting.